Welcome back to the Winter Growers Podcast. In this episode, I speak with Aiden Feeney of Fogtown Farm, which is located on Nantucket Island, 30 miles off of Cape Cod, Massachusetts. Growing up on Nantucket as an outdoor enthusiast and working in landscaping and doing tree work during high school, Aiden became inspired to learn about agriculture and spent time in New York and in Vermont in college and working on farms. In 2019, he returned to the island to start Fogtown Farm on leased conservation land. Now, 5 years later, he has 2 acres under cultivation and is expanding to an additional 3.5 acres on newly leased land. The demand for local produce year-round on the island is great. So over the years, he's added caterpillar tunnels along with more high tunnels in the coming seasons. The wind and winter storms make year-round growing on the island especially challenging, but Aiden has found creative ways to persevere and grow his farm business. Along with his wife, Natasha, and their new son, Arlo, Aiden is committed to year-round growing and supplying his island community with the freshest vegetables around. Today's episode of the Winter Growers Podcast is brought to you by Johnny's Selected Seeds. When you need proven varieties you can count on and detailed guidance from seeding to harvest, consider Johnny's your trusted growing partner. Our same-day shipping can help keep your planting schedules on track when the unexpected happens. We're here to help you grow good food. Turning to Johnny's means you can plant high-quality, trial-proven varieties with confidence and know that our expert staff is ready to help with first-hand knowledge, because we've grown them ourselves. This episode is also brought to you by Rimmel Greenhouses. Whether it's tomatoes to market, flowers in the spring, or vegetables for your family, growing in a greenhouse protected from the weather provides the right environment for a harvest you can count on. Rimmel Greenhouses are strong, durable, and easy to assemble, offering the quality you need to grow productively year-round. The team of experts at Rimmel will be your trusted partners to ensure you get exceptional value from your greenhouse investment. Visit rimmel.com today. All right, enjoy the show. Welcome to the Winter Growers Podcast. Today I have Aiden of Fogtown Farm in Nantucket, which is very exciting because it is an island off of Cape Cod, and farming on an island is always going to be challenging, especially year-round. So welcome to the show, Aiden.
Hi, Clara. Thank you for having me. I'm a big listener, and it's awesome to talk with you because I've gotten a lot of great information from listening to the podcast.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I was very excited to come across your farm and everything that you've been doing on social media. Your account is fabulous with your photos. You have really, I would say, a lot of Salanova envy for me. When I see those photos, I'm like, man, that's some incredible lettuce. And just, your story from what I've learned is really interesting. And I'm really curious about, the additional challenges that you probably experience farming out on an island. Storms, wind conditions. There's so many sort of interesting challenges that I'm excited to talk with you about. But first, I'd love to sort of start with your story and your background. How'd you get into farming?
So I grew up on Nantucket Island. My family's originally from New Jersey. We moved to the island when I was like 2 years old or so. And my mom had a job as an innkeeper, and my dad was working construction. So I grew up, went to high school on the island, and after high school, I started doing landscaping and tree work. And, as different as that is from farming, that was kind of what sparked my interest in it. I think really what sparked it was a nor'easter and watching all the food leave our shelves. And at the same time, I was spending 50 hours a week creating these manicured landscapes. And I figured it would be worthwhile. At that time I was young and looking for something worthwhile to do. And I thought, I enjoy working outside. Maybe I could transfer some of these skills towards growing food. And that's what I decided to do. So I went up to northeastern Vermont, where I went to Sterling College. and started working at a few farms up there. And that's also where I met Natasha. And I did an internship at Flack Family Farm. Most of the farms up there, it was like grass-fed beef and dairy related. And it wasn't until I graduated in 2013 that I started looking for farm work, and most of it was vegetable oriented. So I got a job as a manager in the Hudson Valley outside of New Paltz at Carl Family Farms to start their vegetable enterprise. And then a few years after that, I became the manager at Young's Farm on Long Island, and that was even more vegetables. So Carl Family Farms was probably like an acre and a half or so, and we did a lot of pastured livestock as well. And then Young's Farm was like 15 acres of vegetables and peaches and berries and things like that. And then finally in 2019, I returned to Nantucket to farm conservation land, and that's when I started Fogtown Farm. So we just had our 5th season out on Nantucket.
It sounds to me like you had a pretty direct goal to return to the island. Is that sort of how you approached it and learning about the knowledge or the farms that you selected to work at?
Actually, no. So my thought was that Nantucket, it was going to always be too price prohibitive to even think about farming there. I always saw a really good opportunity there because there aren't that many farms here, and there are a ton of restaurants and a year-round population that's growing each year, and obviously really busy summers. But I didn't see much of an opportunity to get like a foothold to farm there. So I was always thinking about never living back on Nantucket again, because just even finding a place to live on the island is very challenging. But eventually I was enticed to come back because there was this group, Sustainable Nantucket, that had some conservation land that they wanted to use as like a farm incubator space. And I think people had seen that I had been farming off island and that I had, island roots. And they were looking to get qualified growers to get that program rolling. So yeah, after doing 5 years as a farm manager, I had an opportunity for another farm managing gig because we had to leave Long Island for a variety of reasons. But we also saw it as a great opportunity to start our own business. And I should say this coincided with Natasha getting her associate's degree in nursing. And there's also a hospital on the island. And it seemed like then they're always looking for nurses out here for the same reason that it's hard to find people for housing. So it seemed like a good opportunity for both of us. And we actually moved back to the island, and we lived for 3 years in a like one of those tiny houses, like a stick frame thing on a gooseneck trailer. And so that was how we started it.
I love how, circumstances can bring you back to the place that, obviously you grew up on and you recognized had a real need for it, but the limitations that the small island, had, especially around housing. And from what I've heard too, you have a lot more to share about your housing challenges too. So, but that's so great that you've been able to return and reroot yourself in that community. I'm sure it's that much more rewarding, both for you and your wife, Natasha.
Yeah, I think it made a lot of the process of starting a new farm business a lot easier. When you compare that to going to a new community where you don't have much of a connection to it. I had never farmed on Nantucket, and it had me looking at everything about the island in a different way. But I already knew most of the restaurants, and, it's where I grew up. So I know most of the community here. It's like a small, contained community. So, it made that a lot easier, that part of it.
And are your parents still out there too? So do you have, immediate family or extended family?
Yeah, my mom is out here and my brother is out here. But we've kind of scattered because my family never owned property out here. But my mom still lives here. She works at the hospital as well. And my brother does, he works for one of the big companies out here doing like window installations and things like that. So yeah, and I got uncles and my grandmother was here, a good amount of family.
That's great. And I want to, quickly congratulate you because you just had your first child about a month ago, correct?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. 3 weeks ago.
3 weeks
Yep.
ago. Okay. So you
Yeah.
are a brand new dad and parent, and I'm sure you're feeling all the growing pains of that, I would imagine.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's definitely a change of pace, but so far, fatherhood has been awesome.
Congratulations. What's your son's name?
His name's Arlo, Peter Feeney. Peter is Natasha's father's name, and then we just liked the sound of Arlo. Yeah, so that's his name.
That's really sweet. And I imagine you're not getting a huge amount of sleep either.
No, I mean, he's been pretty. It's our first child, so we don't really know what's normal. It seems like he's pretty good as far as newborn kids, but he's up, 3-hour intervals, more or less. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, good. Well, I'm sure to some degree having him in January makes it maybe a little easier rather than a full on July, August baby. So
Yep.
you can ease into it a little more slowly.
Mm-hmm.
Well, good. So when you and Natasha moved back to the island, what was sort of the first step with creating your farm?
So the first thing I did was I wrote a business plan for Farm Credit East, actually, and I got like a capital and an operating loan through their Farm Start program. And that was what kind of gave us I had a little bit of money saved up, but that's what gave us the money to really get things going. And I think we moved back about this time of year, like New Year, about Valentine's Day. And first thing I did, I started prepping the land that I was leasing for cat tunnels and all that, getting the irrigation set up, but also going to restaurants. And my original idea was that the farm, we were going to do a farmer's market every Saturday, but people were telling me that was just for tourists and I wasn't going to be able to sell a lot of food there. So I wasn't sure how great that would be. So what I was really relying on was restaurant sales to begin with. And yeah, the market turned out to be good once we were in there. It was just the type of thing where I think you need growers just being there consistently. And the higher the volume of growers, the more of a draw type of a thing. So the farmer's market's been great. And I don't think we've ever missed a week of it. And that first year, the restaurants were definitely the majority of our sales. Since then, we're doing more retail because we have a farm stand and, we're selling to a few independent grocers on the island as well. But at first it was very restaurant driven.
When you first started, how many other farms were on the island and what was the competition? What did it feel like you were having to contend with?
So there wasn't much. It's definitely not like overly crowded, and it still isn't. The real like vegetable farming presence on the island are these two pretty big family legacy farms. One is Bartlett's farm. They've been on the same land for probably close to 200 years or something. And they do 200 acres of crops. Like their sweet corn is famous on the island. They have a big garden center and a grocery store and things like that. And the other one is Moore's End Farm, which is probably 15 acres, but a similar kind of crop mix where they sell tons of potted plants, a lot of sweet corn. And so I saw an opportunity for a restaurant delivery because both of those farms weren't doing deliveries to restaurants. I know that they had wholesale accounts, but the chefs would go to them. So I saw an opportunity of actually bringing food to them and kind of just specializing in some of those market gardening crops. Because obviously I'm not going to grow sweet corn. At that time, I was just doing like an acre or so, and we've gone up since then. But, so what I tried to do was be very disciplined about my crop selection. And that way, I could just be more efficient with my time and my space, the farming space. And like I said, initially just focus on those restaurants because I saw that was a big opportunity.
And now, are there other similar farms like yours, or are you sort of still unique? Yeah.
So I should say there's Wash Ashore Farm, which that's run by Dan Southey, and he's similar to me in that he's leasing from Sustainable Nantucket. And he had been doing that for like 3 or 4 seasons before I was there. And he's a great farmer. And I feel like there was just a type of thing where once I showed up, there's like a shared energy where his farm has really increased in production as well in that time, and we've kind of grown together. But there's, like I said, there's a great market here, and I don't think that anybody is really, feeling like they're losing anything due to competition. If anything, I think we're kind of in that growth phase as far as like local food is concerned, where people are just inspired by what other people are doing, and it's been really helpful for local food in general on the island.
Yeah, I mean, the great, I guess advantage of an island is you can only go so far to get your food. So the demand or the sense of scarcity must be that much more prevalent.
For sure.
So do you feel like you really have this untapped market?
Well, there's definitely a deep appreciation for local food, and I think there's a few reasons for that. One is that Stop and Shop has a monopoly on the island, essentially, where the two real grocery stores are Stop and Shop, and we're kind of the end of the line for them, where the produce that we get isn't as good as the mainland, for sure. There's a couple small independent grocers, but really people, I think, get a big kick out of getting local food, A, because of the quality, but B, just also because, like I said, we're this self-contained community. And I think people kind of have a sense of pride in knowing the person that's growing their food and knowing exactly where it came from. And people even know the history of the land that I'm farming better than I do. Like these old timers will come up and tell me how it used to be farmed back in the day and all that thing, all that type of thing. Yeah. I don't know. Did that answer your question?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, what has been sort of the reception towards, your approach to farming, sort of the bio-intensive, ecological farming? Has that been readily accepted on the island?
I think that there's like people are loving the produce, and I think that in general it's aesthetically pleasing. The one conflict with that, I would say, is, I'm leasing all my land from conservation organizations, from two different ones at this point, technically. And I think that I'm struggling with their conception that they kind of think of farmland as empty land. And, there's been a little bit of a struggle as far as with things like high tunnels and infrastructure and things like that, where I think a more traditional, maybe big acreage tractor type operation kind of just looks more classic, like bucolic, empty land. But my thought is that as the farm evolves, I look forward to being able to farm in a few different contexts and finding the right context for the piece of land that I'm leasing. So some spots, it's not like you need to cover everything in poly plastic and have, wash and pack stations on every single piece. But that would be the only one bit of friction, I would say. It's just, acknowledging that farming requires a lot of infrastructure to do it profitably and to do it well,
Yeah, no. And I've even heard of, sort of battles with small towns over, like if you look at ecotourism and farms needing to generate more income, and how do they, do that if they're being restricted by what that is or how that's being defined. So it seems like you get a lot more ideas from especially people that have lived there a long time. And if things are changing in ways, how do you make sure that, everyone gets their needs met?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, what's been great about this so far is that it's really been like an organic process, where I think what's pushed a lot of the development of it has been like, a grassroots thing where we're building more and more customers and more people are excited about what we're doing. And that's kind of opened the ears to some of these groups like the Nantucket Land Bank that have opened some new opportunities for me that I'm really grateful for. And so I really have zero to complain about, honestly. Like everything has happened in the right time. And there's just a learning curve when you're talking with people who don't farm for a living. That's all.
Yeah. And do you, with the, this lease setup, do you feel like you have security to be able to farm for the long haul? And as well as your housing scenario, how have you been able to find that security?
So technically, my main farm hub is leased through a nonprofit called Sustainable Nantucket, and that's actually a year-to-year lease. But it's myself. There's really just two full-time farmers that are on that piece of land right now, and we have a great relationship. So I feel very secure with that. Um, Second to that, I just got another farm lease directly through the Nantucket Land Bank on the east side of the island, and that one was a really big deal for me in particular because it includes housing. And we were at this point last year, maybe like a year and a half ago, or like a year ago, where we were going to leave the island because it had been so much harder to find housing than we had anticipated, and we had to leave the tiny house that I was talking about, and it had been a bit of a shuffle from different spots, and we were just kind of thinking of an exit strategy at that point. But this they released this request for proposals for this piece of property that included an old farmhouse, and it was pretty serendipitous. And luckily, our proposal was selected, and now we have a 5-year lease at this property with an option to renew for 15 years out until we need to submit another proposal. So huge relief housing wise, and also a really interesting opportunity to kind of diversify what we're doing as growers and do some other things, because I don't want to run vegetable farms, 2 different vegetable farms on different sides of the island necessarily. So we're going to branch out and do some different things with this property that we're excited about.
Maybe describe the 2 acres that you have leased that you started on. Describe sort of the infrastructure, layout, and the setup, and then this new property and what the future of that could look like.
Okay, so where I got started farming, it's on the south side of the island, and it's kind of, if you look at it on Google Maps, it's kind of the farm belt of Nantucket. It's no coincidence that that's where Bartlett's farm is, and I'm farming on this piece of property that used to be Mount Vernon Farm. And areas that I'm farming there are prime agricultural land. It's really nice, which it's hard to come by on this island because we're kind of a spit of sand 30 miles out, and a lot of it is just kind of glacial till and kind of just desiccated looking landscape. It's beautiful, but not like what you think of as like productive farmland on a lot of it. So on the south side of the island, I got started, farming about 1 acre, and then I expanded to probably about 2 acres. And adjacent to that, I just got another 2-acre lease, and all that stuff is like prime vegetable growing land. Over there, we have 2 propagation houses, which are shared use between myself, Dan, and a few other people who lease small plots there. And then I set up 6 caterpillar tunnels, and that was something I had to push for. They didn't like the idea of high tunnels, so I kind of pushed these cat tunnels as being something less permanent, even though with our wind there, they have to be pretty beefy. So it's not like the type of thing that you can assemble and disassemble easily now. But that was the how we ended up doing that was just with cat tunnels. So yeah, 6 caterpillar tunnels, and then let's say like about 1.5 acres of production currently, and I'm looking to expand into that 2 acres next door as soon as I can get it fenced up with deer fencing.
I'm assuming deer are a challenge.
Yeah, there's a ton of deer. Like if you leave the gate open one night, they're in there. There's tons of them.
Yeah. Are you allowed to hunt them on the property or no?
Yeah. No, that's like a big pastime with Islanders. There's like a shotgun season and an archery season and all that. I'm just like super busy that time of year still. So like that's not something, but a lot of my friends are like really into all that stuff. And there's definitely a big island tradition of that.
Yeah, no, that's great. I was just wondering if you, as a nuisance, if you could shoot them, on your farm.
I think, if you're doing it out of season, I think there is a thing where you have to talk to MDAR, Massachusetts Department of Agriculture. you probably have to fill something out with them, but it's like, that would be an endless battle where you really just need deer fencing.
Yeah.
There's like tons of them. So I haven't even, I'm thinking about trying certain crops on the east side of the island without deer fencing, like lavender. Like I want to do like a big pick your own lavender type of thing and sell a lot of dried lavender. So we'll see if that works. But vegetables, the deer fencing is totally necessary.
Yeah. No. Well, good. Well, I'm glad you can prioritize that. So the cropland, at least from the photos I've seen, is very flat, which is great. And you are doing primarily sort of row cropping on the open fields. And what's your layout system?
So it's heavily inspired by Elliott and by J.M. Fortier. When I started kind of learning how to grow vegetables, I did 1 year on an acre before having really dug deep into both Elliott's and J.M.'s books. And then I read those books over the winter, and the subsequent year, I changed the way I was farming, and it looks a lot more like a market garden, and we had a lot more success. But then I went to Young's farm, which was 15 acres of tractor production, and it was totally different. And then, so now what I'm trying to do is to try to take what I liked from both of those and downsize it into 4 acres of vegetables. But when you look at my field layout, it still looks a lot more like a market garden with 100-foot beds. And it's kind of all done in blocks like that. And 4 foot on center beds with the 30-inch bed top, So, I think that more or less describes it.
And then with the high tunnels or the caterpillar tunnels, those what are the sizes of those, and are those used year round? What would be in them right now, early February?
So because we knew that Arlo was coming, we intentionally kind of scaled back this year. But right now, I have 1 caterpillar tunnel filled with spinach and a few beds of kale as well. In general, we have a really nice, mild maritime climate for winter growing. So with like a 16-foot wide, 100-foot long caterpillar tunnel, which I think that's what all of them are, you can grow a lot. The one challenge I've had is things like managing airflow with lettuce and getting a lot of lettuce drop and stuff like that. But temperature-wise, it stays very mild out here. So in general, we have a very nice kind of moderated climate for growing greens, even through the summer. Because we're 30 miles out to sea, you can kind of bank on our summer high temperatures being 10 degrees less than the mainland. And once the fall comes around, that same thermal bank of the Atlantic Ocean moderates our temperatures and kind of creates a beautiful fall. There's always the risk of tropical storms and stuff like that. Like once October comes around, there's a switch that happens where you can expect severe winds, but the temperature stays really moderate late into fall, even into the winter, where a lot of times, like, I'll leave carrots into the field till like the holidays. So we're a zone 7 technically. The biggest challenge though, I mean, we do get cold temps. Like last year we had a deep freeze where for 2 days it was around 0, but that's very unusual. We haven't had anything close to that this year. And so really the big challenge typically is winds. And this year has been a good example of that, where we kind of got in this little storm pattern where 3 weeks ago when Arlo was born, we had 3 storms where it was gusting over 60. So that's like, you can kind of just count on that being the norm once or twice a week in the winter, I would say. Sometimes even more often and sometimes more severe. So like, it can give a grower some anxiety, particularly using those little caterpillar tunnels, which aren't like the most beefy structures.
Have you lost any yet?
I did my first year. It was pretty brutal.
Okay.
It was pretty brutal. But I would say the other side of that, the other aspect of that too, is the island is pretty flat in general. And the south side of the island in particular, because that has such wide exposure to the ocean, there aren't even any real tall trees. It's like, you could kind of classify that area. They call, like, most of that habitat is a sand plain grassland, they call it. So it's very cool looking, but there isn't a lot for wind blocks out there at all. So it's very exposed. And yeah, my first year, I was farming for the most part on my own that year. I put up, I think 5 tunnels that year. And, they weren't built like super beefy, like they didn't have ground posts in. I think it was arches every 5 feet. And a storm came in the beginning of October when the end walls were still open. I think I lost 3 of them, just like completely mangled up. It looked like a bomb went off for a while out there. And yeah, so that was definitely, a learning curve, because in some ways when I was farming on Long Island, I thought of it as being an excellent analog to growing on Nantucket, where I was like, wow, similar climate, even similar soil type where I was growing. But the big difference is how exposed we are to those storms. Yeah, so that's a big difference.
Yeah. I mean, could you do any sort of hedgerows or any other, permanent windbreaks? Or is that something that's even realistic?
We could, but at this point, I mean, I've just gotten to the point where I know how to build those more sturdy now. And hopefully in the future, I hope to be putting up some new high tunnels on my new 2-acre lease. And I want to just put up like some serious high tunnels there where I'll be able to sleep a little better at night,
Oh, yeah. No, I know the feeling.
Yeah.
So the windstorms, I mean, that does limit you. Obviously, you're not going to have a lot of exposed road cover or low tunnels. You really have to sort of rely on, beefy structures, I guess. Is there anything else that you are thinking of how you're going to mediate, that continuous challenge?
Well, one thing that I had a lot of success with this year was actually in the spring. And the same way that we have really excellent long falls, we have pretty miserable, non-existent springs. And so it can be a challenge to get those first like outdoor pepper crops and everything established on a good time. And particularly if you want to correlate that with when we're at peak season as far as like the tourists and all the summer businesses and everything. So one thing I did this year was I made a lot of like maybe 3-foot high EMT hoops, and I covered it with like the heavy duty protect net, like the really heavy duty stuff. And I saw a huge difference in how that broke the wind. But you're not creating a full poly structure that needs to shed water, and it doesn't hold wind in the same way. So that was really helpful. So I got more of that stuff, and hopefully I'll be using that for all my spring cucurbits and peppers and all of warm season stuff, because that can really just be death on any type of plant when you put it out there in the spring and it's still cold. Like that's when I'm looking on Instagram at other farmers who have zucchini and all this stuff coming in, and it's still cold and windy out here, So yeah, that's one thing I'm trying in addition to the cap tunnels.
Yeah, no, that's a great idea. I like that. I wish that Protect Net was available when I was farming back in Colorado, because we had these Chinook winds that would come just in the spring. And it was the constant battering on the plants of the wind that was more of the problem than the temperatures themselves.
Yeah.
So,
Yep. Yeah, I can relate to that. Yep.
Hey, podcast listeners, we're going to pause for a moment to hear from one of our show sponsors. This episode of the Winter Growers Podcast is brought to you by BCS America. BCS two-wheel tractors are designed and built in Italy, where small-scale farming has been a way of life for generations. Discover the beauty of BCS on your farm with PTO-driven implements for soil working, shredding cover crops, spreading compost, mowing under fences, clearing snow, and more. All powered by a single gear-driven machine that's tailored to the size and scale of your operation. Tractors and attachments are on sale now. Find sale pricing and your nearest dealer at bcsamerica.com. That's bcsamerica.com.
Hey, you all, Farmer Jesse here. So our work has always been about keeping farming information as free and open to the public as we possibly can, and that won't change. One way in which we make that possible, though, is through advertising on podcasts like this, on our YouTube channel, on our forum, and so on. So if you are a small farm-related company selling seeds or tools or something growers could use, or if you're an organization putting on some conference or offering a grant or looking for farmer contributors or something else farm-related that I'm not thinking of, Get in touch with us at farmermichelle@notillgrowers.com. That's farmermichelle@notillgrowers.com. Supporting us helps to grow this work and grow farmers. So we all thank you. Again, that email is farmermichelle@notillgrowers.com, or you can find our contact information at notillgrowers.com. All right. Thanks, y'all. Enjoy the show.
So you've got restaurant sales, farm stand, farmers market. What would you say is the percentage of your sales currently with those outlets?
I would say we're over 50% retail now. And a lot of that is most of that is due to the farm stand, which has been awesome. When I was farming on Long Island, that was all farm stand driven, and the farm stand was really busy. And I was reluctant to get into having people on the farm again, because one source of frustration I had was it seemed like you were just a slave to the store and constantly harvesting to keep up with things. But with how we're doing it at this farm, it's really wonderful. It's like a self-serve honor system. And it's something that I would say the local year-round Nantucketers really appreciate as well, because those people are really busy in the summer, and the thought of going downtown on a Saturday morning for most of them is really unappealing. So as much as I love doing the farmers market, a lot of the local people hate the idea of going downtown in the summer where it's really busy. So they love that they can just come out to the farm stand at any time of the day. So yeah, that's been great.
Yeah. And how are you stocking that then? How do you keep it, flush with product?
Yeah, I have, I have one double door, display refrigerator, and one single door display refrigerator. And then a whole lot of tables, stocking them full of tables. And, the one downside to doing that is I feel like more items become bagged just to prevent them from wilting than the farmer's market. But there's a lot of things that make it a lot more convenient for me as well. It's when I look at the calories expended per sale, it's a lot better at the farm stand for sure.
And do you have, what is your harvest schedule through the week? How are you able to keep it stocked? How does that work for you?
So we have walk-in coolers on the farm as well. So we try to make it so we're just drawing for that and not harvesting as much from the field for the farm stand. Really what dictates our harvest schedule is the deliveries that we do twice a week, where we do restaurant deliveries every Tuesday and every Friday. And that's really what drives our entire schedule, as far as everything. So the whole week is kind of set up around those 2 days. And then Saturday's the farmer's market, and Sunday we try to relax other than stocking the farm stand. Yeah.
And do you generally feel that that schedule and harvest system works for keeping that farm stand well enough stocked? I mean, because you hate to have someone come out there and something's not there. Would you actually go out and get it for them? I mean,
I try. I think there's always going to be a little bit of that.
Yeah,
but we're just getting better at it as time goes on. And this year I had a really nice high schooler working for me, and I want to kind of just task her with farm stand duty as much as possible, where she'll just be there, and that will be totally what's on her mind. It'll still be self-serve, but just keeping it clean, keeping it well stocked. If there is somebody there, she's there to answer a question, type of a thing. Because there aren't enough hours in the day for me to be running that, doing that as well, Yeah.
And you speak of employees. How many other employees do you have? What's sort of the breakdown throughout the year?
So my first year, 2019, I was kind of under the delusion that I could do most of it myself. And through a stroke of luck, I was friends with one of the farm managers at Bartlett's Farm at that time. And I needed help putting up the poly on my tunnels. And he brought some of his crew over there, which were, it was three guys that I became really good friends with, who were at the time in America on J1 visas. So it was Nicholas, Isaac, and Vincent. And they're all from Africa. They're from Uganda and Tanzania. And I became good friends with them. And then the next year, I knew I needed some help. And I put like a thing out on Instagram or Facebook or whatever. And all those guys said, "Hey, we're still in the country. We would love to work for you." So because they were able to extend their visas. So that year, I just actually had two full-time employees, and it was Isaac and Nicholas, and they stayed with me full-time, I think, for like 2 years, and then they went down to part-time because as they stayed in the country, they just have other things going on. And then Vincent came back to work for me this year, as well as like a whole mix of local part-time people. Like with most of the local people, I'm kind of just working around their jobs already. Like the Nantucket way for a lot of people is you have 3 or 4 jobs, and there's like real seasonal differences and everything. So I guess this year I had, let me think, it's hard to come up with like full-time equivalents, but probably like 3.5 full-time positions or something like that, with one guy working crazy hours like me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I imagine that's got to be a challenge, in addition to having stable housing, as you mentioned, but also stable employees.
For sure. That's like, it's a nail biter. And it's like, it's one of the things that has me always thinking about how to set up the farm in a way that I can just manage it all. And yeah, I mean, also something that I was really got lucky about though, because Nicholas, Vincent, and Isaac are like experienced farm workers, and like it was just like a match made in heaven. But like I said, those guys, like Nicholas is going to nursing school full time now. Isaac has different jobs in the mix, so it's something that's constantly evolving, and I'm always just looking for ways to cut down on labor just to make it so, if possible, I can hire just harvest help, because it's so hard to teach somebody A through Z, farm production each year, So if I can just make it so people are mostly harvesting, my life is a lot easier,
Yeah. But even that, I mean, that takes a certain level of training
and
sure,
skill. Yeah.
And
I've been spoiled the last few years where now you got to teach somebody how to bunch radishes every single time, or whatever it is.
Right. Yeah. I mean, consistency is such a huge, huge thing.
Yep.
Yeah. And, your wife, Natasha, she worked on the farm as well in combination with, you said she's a nurse or a nurse practitioner?
Yeah. So our first year, 2019, Natasha was full-time at the hospital, but she was still helping out on the farm. And then the farm got its legs under itself, and Natasha was able to go down to 2 days at the hospital, and she actually re-enrolled in college. So she'd been doing online schooling this whole time while helping at the farm. And now she just got her master's, and she's a nurse practitioner now. She should, when she goes back to work, it will be as a nurse practitioner. So yeah, that's been great because
and a mom and a farmer.
Yeah. So it's been great though, because the first year, Natasha having the stable income with health benefits and all that really helped get the farm up and running. And that's something I recommend to any young farming couples is maybe don't put all your eggs in one basket right away. But then the farm, got some success, and it made it so Natasha could drop back from that and progress with her career. So it's been a really nice symbiotic thing, and something I recommend to growers.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I love the combination of, the nurturing of plants and nurturing people and caring for people. And, it seems like a very complementary set of skill sets and
absolutely
professions.
Yeah.
So what would you say is your top crop for the winter? What do you love growing in the winter, or what's the easiest to grow in the winter for you?
It's definitely spinach for sure, because, we're kind of spoiled, like I said, as far as the market, and there's not a lot of people doing winter growing out here. But I'd say spinach and kale. The one different thing that I started doing this year that I really like is I'm transplanting all my greens now. And I'm even going to start transplanting my arugula for the tunnels as a new thing, because I've really been struggling with...
In like paper pot, or how about?
That's the idea.
Yeah,
so
okay.
I got some like multi-seed pellets from Italy. So I think it's like 30 seeds per pellet, and I'm going to transplant those with the paper pot at a 6-inch spacing, and hopefully get more consistent results with the arugula. And I did the same thing with the spinach, just 6-inch spacing or so, and it's been super productive as opposed to direct seeding with the Jang, which, I just was having iffy results with, maybe too dense in areas. Yeah, those are my big ones. I've kind of gone away from root crops in the fall, but I'll do like the Hakurai turnips and stuff in the spring in there. And then it's always, I grow a lot of tomatoes. So that's always the juggling act, is making space for the tomato successions and also some cucumbers, because those crops you can't do them outside here with the slow spring with all the wind. So I do Salanova in the fall typically, but I just haven't had much luck with the powdery mildew and lettuce drop and stuff like that. It's always a nice bonus where I can get like some nice mescaline mix, and I end up blending it with, baby kale and spinach and some of these other, radicchios and stuff like that. But as a standalone crop, I haven't had much success with it in the cat tunnels, to be honest.
And is that, I think from what I've seen on the photos, you have landscape fabric on the bed with the lettuce on top. Is that?
Yeah. So outside, less so in the tunnels. I mean, sometimes I do it in the tunnels just because it helps keep everything clean. But that has been our system with the Salanova, and that is for sure our most important crop. Like this year we were doing about 7 100-foot beds a week being harvested, planted, and taken out of production each week. I'm hoping to move away from the landscape fabric, because that's one of those bottleneck points as far as like labor and just taking up a lot of time. I feel like it grows beautiful, really clean lettuce. But what I'm hoping to do this year is instead of using the fabric, top dress with a lot of compost, because I'm making compost on the farm and I'm also bringing in landscape compost. And I just got a little ground driven toe behind compost top dresser. So I want to be able to really put down a thick layer of mulch of compost, and then stale bed, and then paper pot in there. I just got a 2-row paper pot, so hopefully I can do 4 rows of lettuce really fast, and we'll see how that works. It's a big gamble because it's such an important crop for me. But at the same time, I feel like if it works out, there could be a lot of benefit to that. So yeah, that's what we're trying this year.
Yeah. And maybe you don't have easy access, because it's always seems to be the case on coastal areas. You can't get easy access to crab and lobster waste, but do you have any access to that on the island? Because that is a huge soil amendment improver, especially for lettuce and preventing lettuce drought.
I would love to talk with you about that, because I actually had somebody reach out to me who runs a restaurant called The Lobster Trap, and he was telling me he's got tons of lobster heads for me. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Take it. I mean, you can obviously compost it, or you could just till it directly into the soil, ahead of time. So it really is a huge soil improver. So
yeah.
If you can get
it. There's all types of cool coastal resources that I haven't really been able to tap into. One of them, I'm not totally sure how they break down nutrient wise, but most of our North Shore and harbor beaches here are covered in eelgrass, which I'm sure, I know a lot of gardeners use it for mulching and things like that. And then there's an extensive bay scallop fishery. So like every year we produce, mountains of bay scallop shells, which I think are very high in magnesium. It might be a little too high in magnesium compared to the calcium ratio in there, if I remember that right. But either way, I would love to, at some point, kind of explore getting a hammer mill or something like that, and being able to pulverize some of these things and blend them into compost and stuff.
Yeah. No, gosh, having access to all of the coastal, resources is huge for any farmer. But that does actually makes me ask the question of how do you get, other resources out? Do you bring out potting soil, for instance, off island? And it must be somewhat cost prohibitive to do a lot of those.
For sure.
And how do you deal with that?
Yeah. So freight to the island can be a challenge. It's expensive, where you can more or less count on paying like $150 per pallet of anything extra just to get it over on the boat and delivered to the house, to the farm. We're lucky that we have one farm supplies distributor based out of Wareham, Mass. And the reason that they're based in Wareham is there's so much cranberry production there. But I think in the last maybe few years, I mean, since I've been here at least, they started carrying some of the more organic vegetable type supplies. So that's been really nice. And other than that, my second year of farming, I bought a cargo van, and I spent a good amount of the wintertime going off island, filling it up and going back and forth. But yeah, it's definitely a challenge. And just even if I was to try to get my van off island in the summer, it's really difficult to even find a spot, and it's expensive. So yeah, it's definitely adds another layer of complexity for sure.
Yeah. No, I mean, imagine it makes you have to be that much more resourceful of what you can do directly with what you have.
And, it's a 2.5 hour boat ride for context. So, it takes some time and it's expensive. It's kind of like if you wanted to leave your local town, you had to take a 2.5 hour flight for people on the mainland, you know what I mean? Just to leave your town,
Right.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Well, what do you see? I guess, you're in year 5 of this farm. Oh, I know what I want to ask. What is the term Fogtown Farm? Where did that come from? And then your logo is that a peregrine falcon that's in your logo?
It's an osprey.
Osprey. Okay.
Yeah. So it's kind of a silly origin. I just kind of like the alliteration of it. But when I was a little kid growing up here, me and all my friends were really into surfing and skateboarding and all that. And there was this group of skaters from California back in the day that went by Dogtown and the Z Boys, and they were like surfers and stuff. And we were kind of obsessed with those guys in like 7th grade, and we started doing like little graffiti artwork of Fogtown instead of Dogtown. So I kind of just did it as an inside joke with my friends around here, and I thought it sounded nice. And the flip side of that too is like, with such a tourist kind of like tourist driven image of Nantucket, I kind of like reminding people that it can be really foggy here and not always sunshine, Yeah. And then the osprey was, that artwork was done by one of my best friend's wife, Danielle Stanton. And she's just like a really talented illustrator. And I asked her to do an osprey flying over some crops, and she did that. And it's been a logo. And since then, people really love it. I've been doing t-shirts and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a beautiful logo. I really like it. So if this is year 5, where do you see yourself in the farm in the next 5 years?
So I would definitely like to continue doing what's working as far as, the crop selection that we're growing right now, and kind of streamlining that and mechanizing that wherever possible. But also with some opportunities for expansion, I want to get into growing some crops that I'm just more passionate about, and things that aren't as profitable on a per square foot basis, but things I really like and things that customers really like, because there's definitely an advantage to having, cured onions year round, or I even love cabbage. I love just growing it and looking at it in the field. So a lot of things like that. And I guess kind of expanding where appropriate, my crop selection. Like this year, for instance, I started experimenting more with radicchio because I don't really have the space to grow a huge planting of fall brassicas just because of my rotation. But with our climate, I feel like we could really keep radicchio outside happy for a really long time. Even with the wind burn, you're just peeling off those outside leaves. So that's something I want to expand on for sure as well. And then with this new lease that we have, it's part of an old dairy farm, and it's not the best vegetable growing land. It's rolling hills, and it's very sandy. I mean, that can be worked with, but it's not really appropriate for vegetable growing. And there's a beautiful freshwater spring, which is pretty exotic for Nantucket, that goes right through the middle of the property. So I'm trying to do less intensive production out here. And my idea is right now it's one field is going to go to lavender, which could be, we'll be selling dried bouquets and things like that, but also kind of have more of an experiential thing for customers where they could come and pick lavender. And that's like a beautiful field with views of one of the harbors on the island and stuff. And the other field getting into berry crops and kind of like a little more wacky. Like I want to try growing persimmon and some things out here because it's so mild. And then the front of the property has an old glass greenhouse that's going to be renovated. And I want to do plant sales there because we do some plant sales from our farm stand and it's popular. It kind of drives me crazy doing it, like the extra work of it, but I see a lot of potential in it. So the grand vision for this property is kind of doing some of those less profitable, but kind of fun crops, doing another self-serve farm stand in a barn here and a retail space for plants. Yeah.
Well, beautiful. It's great. I love hearing the vision and what you're excited about. It sounds like you have a lot of work cut out for yourself.
It might be a little crazy, but I'm trying. I mean, I am trying to make it as manageable as possible, for sure.
Of course, yeah. And I wish a windfall of good people to help support you in this process because obviously it needs a lot of support.
Yeah.
So
thank you.
Well, good. Well, I think we're just about to our lightning round. Are you ready for your questions?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Number 1, what's your favorite crop to grow, cook, or eat?
I would say, it changes always, but I have to say this year I grew a lot of beautiful storage onions and, I just finished eating them now. I just had to go back to miserable Stop and Shop onions now. So I want to, it has to be onions because, I love seeing them growing in the field. I think they're really beautiful, like the foliage on onions. And also, when you're harvesting these cured bulbs and they actually cure correctly, and then you get to enjoy them with every meal. It's got to be alliums for me.
Yeah. You can pretty much use an allium at every meal. What gets you up in the morning?
Sometimes it's harder than other times, but
your baby right now, probably. Right?
Definitely the baby right now. But I would say in the summer, it is all those connections I have with the employees, with the customers, with all the chefs, and even the grocery store owners because I wasn't sure what it would be like having wholesale be such a major part of the farm business at first, but it's really turned into a pretty cool. You just form these great relationships with these other small business owners, and you get a lot of gratification out of that too, just like you do with a farmer's market customer, where you kind of get to collaborate with these chefs who really love your stuff, and get the grocery store owners excited about certain things. So yeah, that's been really wonderful. And I'd have to say that's probably what motivates me the most is not wanting to let these people down and wanting to just continue, having that relationship thrive.
What is the hardest part of farming?
Man, I think farming as a business, sometimes if you're in a pessimistic mood, you can drive yourself a little crazy just with how much uncertainty there is involved in it. It always kind of feels like a miracle when everything works out and you have a year that worked out better than expected. But I would just say the hardest part is managing all the uncertain variables of, am I going to be able to find employees? Are we going to have, what's the spring going to be like? Is it going to just flat all my peppers out or all those little unknowns, just juggling all those and rolling with the punches.
What is your favorite tool?
I would say the practical answer of that for me is the tractor at this point because, I just got a Kubota tractor last year. And I think my payments are less than $700 a month and maybe 500. I can't remember off the top of my head, but at that payment, it's my best friend. I can't imagine having life without it at this point. And it becomes this platform for you to build all these other tools off of and design your whole other farm around. And part of that can kind of be a little anxiety producing because it's like, oh, did I make the right decision with this wheel spacing? And with each tool you invest in, it's kind of like committing on that track. But overall, it's made my life so much easier. I would say on like the more like kind of just funny end of things, just like a sharp harvest knife makes life so much easier. And is like if I don't have it on my hip on a given day, that's like not a good thing, you know? So that's another part of it. And a runner up would be my delivery van, which I kind of bought that on a whim. I thought I'd have a side business of delivering grass-fed beef from Vermont on Nantucket. So I got a Sprinter van, and that didn't work out at all. But now I have the Sprinter van that has made my life so much easier.
Great. What's your brand rec for the knife, the harvest knife?
I normally just use Mora knives. My crew really likes the Victorinox knives, like the ones that Johnny sells. But I really like the Mora knives because those are cheap and I can get them really sharp and I can lose a million of them. It's fine.
And how do you spell that? I'm not sure
Mora.
I'm familiar with it.
Yes.
Mora?
So it's Mora.
Okay.
And then it's like a Swedish company, but they're just simple fixed blade knives that are pretty affordable. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll have to check those out. What is your favorite smell and least favorite smell on the farm?
Favorite smell, I think every year has to be tomatoes growing in the high tunnel. Every year that kind of hits me, and like at that moment, everything is okay in the world when you're smelling beautiful, early summer tomatoes. In particular, sun golds, like even just in the tray, the sun gold tomatoes smell a little better, if you ask me. And then least favorite smell, I would say after the farmer's market, a lot of times we have a couple bins of just like trimmed carrot tops and beet tops and cracked tomatoes and stuff. And sometimes if the van is loaded improperly at the end of the day, that bin will stay in the back of the van for a couple days. And that's got to be my least favorite smell, just that amalgam of hot, nasty mess.
Yep. Rotting produce.
Yeah.
Who is an inspiring farmer or land steward you'd want to have as a dinner guest, either living or deceased?
Man, this is a tough one. But when I think about like the land steward aspect of it and the people who have kind of shaped the way we think about nature and our relation to the land, at first I was thinking of guys like Thoreau and Emerson, but then I thought more recent about guys like, I kind of feel like the logical extension of those guys are people like John Muir and Aldo Leopold. And I think both John Muir and Aldo Leopold were both farmers as well. So I'd have to say either one of those guys because they're like wilderness nature sages. But also, I think John Muir grew grapes in California, I think, as a career. And I think Aldo Leopold had like a ranch in Wisconsin or something like that. So I'd say one of those two guys.
Do you have a particular question that you'd want to ask them?
Oh, man. I don't know. I think I would just let them talk. Mostly, I don't know. Yeah, but if I wasn't involved with farming, I think I would be doing something more like wilderness related because that was like the one compromise with farming was I was always really into backwoods camping, surfing, all these things like heavy wilderness pursuits where farming you get to be outside, but you kind of sacrifice some of that. So I would just say one of those two guys because you get a little bit of both with both of them.
What is one piece of advice you wish you had starting out or something you wish you had done differently?
So I think as a bit of advice, I would just put into my ear that the goal isn't necessarily the goal should be to create a farm that works for you. And by that, I guess what I mean is like success. How you should define success is whether you're happy farming and whether the farm is enhancing other aspects of your life. Because if you're just a slave to the farm, you're missing out on a lot of other things. And not even saying that I have that perfectly figured out. I feel like I'm getting a little better at it each year. Like I'm still working insane hours, but I feel less exhausted at the end of the day. So yeah, I would say that like that should be the focus. And I think like when you follow that logic, it just helps you think about things like saving for the future and thinking about like creating a business that works for you more than just dedicating your whole existence to the farm, if that makes any sense.
What is your learning edge, or where do you feel like your abilities or understanding as a farmer could grow?
For sure, my weakness in farming is just like a lot of those administrative back end business skills where like just like taxes every year, like all that stuff gives me a lot of anxiety, and I end up paying a lot of money to have other people do it a lot of the time, and all that stuff. So yeah, I guess I would say maybe also record keeping. Like I think of myself as a pretty good planner because I get inspired over the winter, but then once I'm in the thick of it, all plans or all record keeping is kind of like out the window, and that kind of falls in line with those same skills, I think.
Yeah. It is an interesting question to ask, though. Why do we expect a farmer to be brilliant at every one of those tasks?
Yeah, it's...
like, why should anyone have to be an expert at every single one of those things? I mean,
some of them, it's just the red tape of running a small business, even.
Yeah.
It's not even specific to farming. But yeah, all the added things on top of farming can make it harder to deal with those for sure.
Yeah, no, I mean, I guess I love the concept of, of having that community where you have people that are good at all these different things and you're able to collaborate.
Yeah.
And leverage each other's strengths. Yep. So that's my vision.
Yep.
How we get there, I don't know, but
yeah, absolutely.
Okay. How do you relate to that which is out of your control?
For me, I like to use those out of control moments as like a learning opportunity where it's kind of like a hard dead end. It's easy to be like, okay, I need to change course on this, whatever it might be, whether it's a crop loss or, I don't know, a lost employee or whatever. There's no ignoring that problem a lot of the time. So for me, a lot of times when it's completely out of my control, I guess just out of necessity, I can deal with it easier than some of those other things. Like we were just talking about the back end stuff where sometimes you have these things that are in your control, but you ignore them and, that monkey on your back turns into a gorilla on your back type of scenario. I struggle a lot more with that type of stuff. So sometimes it's almost a relief when it's like, oh, this thing happened. It was painful, but there's an opportunity for evolving or learning, with that experience.
Yeah, no, I mean, when you see those greenhouses get mangled, it's not like, you have anything you can do in that actual moment.
Yeah,
so.
yeah, for sure.
And finally, how will you grow old, or how are you growing old farming?
This is an interesting question for me. That's like one of those monkey on the back things where it's like, man, I haven't thought about this too much. But
well, now that you have a child, I wonder if it becomes a little bit more pressing.
Well,
right?
Yeah, and it's interesting too because I live on Nantucket where, luckily we have secure housing right now. But if we ever want to, it's different from somebody who owns, I think, their farm ultimately. But for now, I mean, what my focus has been, and I'm happy at least with being this far, is just trying to design the farm and set up the farm in a way like I'm already 15 or 20 years older than I am now, because I know that I'm not going to want to be bending over as much or working on my knees as much when I'm 55. So, I want to stay fit and I want to stay active, but at the same time, I want to make some of those menial jobs a lot more enjoyable and easy. So just trying to invest in the right tools and the right processes to get that done. And because I'm farming on leased land too, it kind of frees up a lot of the discretionary income of the farm to invest more in, like I'd say, like tools rather than infrastructure. We still have a good amount of infrastructure costs, but a lot of those things like, I don't know, like those serious improvements, that it's either provided by Sustainable Nantucket or it's just something that I'm not thinking about doing. So, I would say that just try to design the farm like you're already 55 years old, or at least thinking that way. That way, washing carrots or whatever isn't quite as much of a burden.
Yeah. No, good answer. Well, thank you. That concludes our lightning round session. And it's been really a pleasure to speak with you, learn more about, how you're making a farm work out on Nantucket and year round. And I look forward to seeing what you do in 5 years. So thank you so very much.
Awesome. Thanks, Clara. It was a lot of fun talking with you.
Today's show was produced by me, Clara Coleman, with support from No-Till Growers. Special thank you to Willie Breeding for the theme music. Thank you to the patrons at patreon.com/no-till-growers for helping to make this show possible. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next week.